everybody. This is Jen Kleinhens.
And I'm Rob Foes.
And you're listening to another episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand, a podcast where we talk about our thoughts and opinions on marketing, from customer experience to brand, and everything in between. Join us today as we talk to Richard Boon, Managing Director of Print Management and Marketing Agency, Webmart.
So when we sort of think about guests for this show, and we try and get people on who kind of have two elements. One, they've got to have an interesting story to tell. And secondly, they've got to bring a sort of depth of knowledge in an area where Jen and I maybe have some, but don't have as much. So we got the chance to chat to someone who's managing director for a sort of print management company, which I think print is something that I think Jen and I have talked about in podcasts. I think that's a little bit overlooked recently. But also his company is driven by this concept of Marxist capitalism, which we'll get to later. And we figured it'd be great value to get them on the podcast. So I would like to welcome to the podcast Richard Boon, who is Managing Director of Webmart. Welcome to the podcast, Richard.
Hi, guys. How you doing?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for joining us on this very cold winter's day. I swear it's been night all day. I haven't actually... I'm not sure the sun has risen once. Well, look, so what we do at the beginning of these interviews is we kind of do a sort of credibility part, which is why should people, again, it sounds so blunt when I say it like this, so I apologize. Why should people care about what you think? And I think what's interesting in this case is our podcast, 38% of our podcast downloads come from the UK, but 62% come from the rest of the world. So if you could introduce yourself and what it is you do and what Webmart do, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, sure. Well, I kind of hate labels, but I guess you could say I'm a millennial that is bucking the trend almost that I know we talk about quite often with millennials, bouncing between jobs and things like that. I started around 17, 18, quite early in through entrepreneurship with a mentor. Through pitching a business idea. And I've been at the company 14 years, so very much bucking the kind of millennial trends there. Working alongside global brands, retail, e-commerce, charity, sort of gaming sectors, working my way up to managing director at the age of 31. And yeah.
Depressing. Says the 43-year-old male in the building. Yeah, that's hugely impressive.
Thank you. But yeah, it's obviously been it's all sort of, again, like I said, a bit like with COVID this year, everything sort of blurred into one. My whole career seems to feel like that. And yeah, I've overseen the sort of evolution from sort of the print management aspects to kind of more integrated agency, and also watched quite a lot of long-standing clients change and evolve through that time as well.
Good stuff. Yeah. And you're based in just in Oxford primarily, are you not?
Yeah, Oxfordshire. But I've sort of bounced between London and other areas as well.
Good stuff. Well, look, it's we kind of talked about sort of three different areas we want to cover off, and I think one of the things you talked about, obviously, you are one of the kind of strings to the bow of Webmart is print and print management, alongside other things, and we'll get to the kind of evolution of Webmart and where it's headed a little bit later on. But I think print is in an interesting place at the moment, whether it's direct marketing or retail or whatever it is, and COVID obviously has had a huge impact on that. So sort of structurally over the last few years has been quite an increase in digital alternatives where print held sway, email, social, outdoor, even digital indoor signage in stores and retail and all that kind of stuff. If you were to try and sort of pitch to somebody the value of print, and I appreciate this kind of covers quite a few different areas there, what do you see as the role and value of kind of print marketing as an alternative to the sort of where digital's kind of has been taking us recently?
I think that's the thing. It's an alternative. I mean, what was predominantly the main channel for reaching people. Obviously, I've seen the rise of digital over the years and the nature of print changing in its role. And it's very much, I guess, lost its sort of identity in the marketing mix, I would say. And I would say that, obviously, all these things, it comes down to balance. And I think that the sort of knowledge and education and the purpose of sort of print and physical marketing in store, at home, at events has changed dramatically. But I would say forgetting it, in the mix. It just seems like it's a wasted opportunity when it comes to getting the most out of the ecosystems people have got digitally. A physical touch point in this day and age, I think, is really important to combine with the digital ecosystems that people are so good at.
Interesting. And so are there kind of are there misconceptions about print that have that you think that people have? Like, do they think it's going to cost way more than it's going to, or are there limitations or something? So, what is it that's driven that shift from digital to print? Is it purely just a cost thing, or what's your kind of
Yeah, I
view
mean,
on
how long have you got? I mean, misconceptions
About 40
within
minutes.
print. Yeah, there's quite a number really. I mean, cost, ROI, speed, flexibility, environmental. There's some huge misconceptions when it comes to physical marketing. I mean, just to give you a few sound bites on that. I mean,
Yeah, go for
obviously,
it.
the purpose has evolved, and I think people have kind of left it behind almost. And that loss of physical touch point means that it's looked at in isolation, and actually, it's all like Mark Richardson said, right? It's all marketing. And I think
A fellow Ritzonite, as I've
yes,
described us, the Church of the Ritzon. Yes.
yes, and I was running the event actually with Mark Ritson in the BFI IMAX when he gave the speech for the first time, and he was talking about the rise of people using the D word in their job title with digital, and
Yeah.
I think it's become this kind of battleground between sort of like online versus offline, and actually the way I see it, if you look at the use of print holistically, the ROI is there. I mean, we've seen even through recent data through Jigmail that more people are using print to get people to drive them to their e-commerce offering. And I think if you just look at it in isolation, sure, it could look expensive, but also as part of the mix, you get so much more out of the whole ecosystem.
And I think there's a few things, when you research, and I've obviously used print for a while, but also researched in this kind of area, there's a few things that kind of make it stand out as a tool that's available at least to experiment with, rather than just writing off completely. So, we know there are many studies that show that comprehension is better off a written page than it is, or printed page than it is off a screen. It hangs around in the house longer. And there's another one: consumers aged 45 to 54 are the demographic most likely to respond to direct mail. And as we talked about, Jen and I talked about in a podcast, maybe 3 or 4 podcasts ago, about age in marketing. Everyone's obsessed with youth, millennials, people like you. but really, the ones with all the money, 45, 55, 65 plus. So I think it's got some attributes that make it at least worth, as you said, testing as a tactic, as a tool to see what it can do.
Sure, and I think there's a lot of evidence around the sort of cut through even to a younger demographic. I mean, let's face it, not I think you said in one of your previous podcasts, you aren't your customer, and consumption of media is different based on age groups. But there's a lot of data to suggest that younger people are very receptive because, let's face it, how many people are writing and communicating with millennials and other generations using this medium? And I think that actually, because it's so rare, it has such giant cut through to drive you to their digital e-commerce ecosystem. So
yeah
Yeah.
And I think I was reading, I'm a lefty Guardian reader, and there's some really interesting articles where there were some contradictions in it. So both recently, Argos and IKEA have decided not to print catalogs anymore.
Yes, this
I
week
think,
almost, I think it was the news again.
yeah,
for
IKEA was this week, and
Yeah,
Argos was earlier in the year, wasn't it?
that's right. Yeah.
But what's also really interesting is there was another article in the Guardian, and I'll post all these in the show notes for people who are interested, where it talks about the idea that because of COVID and because of lockdown, print has increased. So Beth Busterwick, who is the boss of Jigsaw, said the fashion trainer sent more catalogues this winter after getting a surprisingly strong response to its usual mail. She's quoted as saying, "It's a brilliant way of keeping a brand front of mind during lockdown. On average, people will spend 3 or 6 minutes on a website, but a catalogue of direct mail can lie on a coffee table for a month to 6 weeks." Have you seen a change since lockdown in terms of your business and what you've seen coming through?
Oh, massively, yeah, and it's been great for us because it's opened up far more conversations with brands exploring it as a method.
Hmm.
I think the interesting thing is that human psychology side of things is that humans don't change very quickly, and so from a habits perspective, if you're reaching out to them using a catalog or something to browse, that's still going to be used, especially whilst everyone's at home. And I think that consumer shopping habits have changed quite dramatically.
Mm.
I've seen the rise of from the high street to e-commerce brands that don't have shops, or there's click and collect. And I think that
Hmm.
actually reaching people using print at home, you've got a captive audience currently this year, and certainly with more people browsing before making the purchase online, we've seen a massive amount of brands reaching out using catalogs. I mean, obviously the 700 page, giant sort of yellow
Mm.
pages we have over here in the UK.
Yeah.
The death of those kind of size publications, that's gone. But I think the rise of smaller, more relevant, targeted messages, that's what we've seen this year, from our
Interesting.
perspective.
What I thought was also interesting was that Argos chose to do a printed gift guide.
Yes.
And I believe, didn't they feature it in their TV ads as well? It's all built
Yep.
around
Yep. It's what the TV ad is completely. It's a couple of kids with
circling the
the
gifts that kids want and stuff, isn't it?
yeah,
From
which
what I
is
remember.
interesting because when I was a kid, and they have discontinued this, but in the U.S. we have the Sears catalog, which I think is a lot like that,
Hmm.
where it's a big, thick catalog, and you would go through it every Christmas and you would circle things, and you could like leave notes and do things. And it's really interesting to talk about sort of the psychology of print, because in some ways, because it's a more tactile medium, I think for things like clothes, for Christmas shopping, I think you're really right. There's some kind of connection, and I don't know if there's a study that maybe proves this out. That obviously like engagement's higher, as we were just kind of citing earlier with something like a
Hmm.
print catalog, but it's a longer engagement, and I think in some ways it's a more memorable, like more emotional
Mm.
engagement
Mm.
with the products, with the brand, in a way that it's hard to duplicate in a digital channel.
Oh,
I
totally. I would agree
Yeah,
with that.
because I think there's an element of there's a tactility that you don't get. There's a smell sometimes, there's more. It's using more of your senses and all that kind of stuff, isn't it? Rather
Hmm.
than
Yeah, and you
reading
think
off
you,
a.
you think about how much money's invested in trying to get cut through using digital, fighting for that screen space. I mean, I read something the other day which talks about kind of, at least this year, the life cycle of waking up to a small screen, moving to a medium screen, and then ending up at night on a bigger screen.
Yep.
And
So sadly true,
it
isn't it?
is, it is, and it really fills my life for the last kind of 6 months. But it's interesting to see that using print in combination with that seems to be having a great effect, and as you say, tactility wise,
Mm.
and truly just providing a completely different perspective on products. Which, let's face it, if you're scrolling and you're competing, there's 6 competing brands trying to sell you camera bags or gifts and things like that, which is the one that's going to actually help you make a purchase? It's the one that you've received
Mm.
something through to stand out from the crowd.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's an interesting conversation because I mean I remember at Game every bloody year was the conversation of like, are we going to do a Christmas catalogue? Are we going to
Yeah.
do a gift guide? Are we going to print everything out? And I'm sure you remember some of those, Richard,
Yeah.
back in the day. But the bigger problem we always had was we couldn't put prices in, which makes renders a catalogue utterly pointless. But that kind of idea, I think, is that especially at Christmas, there's a nostalgia thing too. To Jen's point about the Sears catalogue and all that kind of stuff, there is a nostalgia element that I think it plays into it. From your perspective, do you think the changes that you've seen through COVID? I mean, this is like a $64 million question, but it'd be interesting to see whether those persist.
Yes,
Whether people who
totally.
are running it this year feel like they've got the value and whether they will continue to use it as a complementary channel.
I think that actually we're really early on the journey, and I think we talked about misconceptions earlier. It's going to
Mm.
take a long time to educate people in the balance of getting the balance right in using print in the mix, and using it in the right way. It doesn't mean using it in large volumes or spending lots of money on it. It just
Mhm.
means using it when the timing's right, or the campaign requires it. And I think that looking at some of the patterns, people are still going to interact with stuff at home. You still have to pick it up and do something with it. And I think the rise of things like we have Jikmail now, which provides a bit of a currency and insight on a level with things like TV and digital
Would you like
means.
to explain what Jigmail is to the people in this country, outside this country might not know, or even
Yeah,
people within this country who might not know?
yeah, sure. So the issue we've had within printed media is providing a level of almost, a currency almost of insight to show response rates and interaction with physical medium. Because obviously it's easy to track when it comes to digital, and therefore it requires more budget because it's easier to invest in,
Mhm.
right? Jigmail's come around and provided a balance, a board of people that effectively receive things at home, and then they can show what interaction that they've had with the medium. So actually,
Mm.
that's really, really helpful for that sort of test and learn strategy. But also, it provides a wealth of data we didn't have before on how people are using physical marketing, right? Which we couldn't
Yeah.
track before. So now, actually, the stats we're getting back provides a completely new light on how consumers are interacting with print, and it kind of overcomes a lot of the misconceptions that
Mm.
marketeers maybe have. So it's,
Yeah.
I think, quite powerful.
Well, thank you for the explanation there. In terms of the sort of innovations that you think maybe people that have passed marketers by potentially as they've potentially moved their money away from print, or stuff that's coming down the pipe, is there anything that you kind of go, wow, that's cool? Like, I've not seen that before. What are the sort of things that are sort of, to use a colloquial term, floating your boat in the print market?
It's a really interesting question because I think sometimes people look at print as this sort of archaic old industry, and it is, right? Goes back hundreds of years.
Yeah.
I don't actually think innovation is the crux of the problem. I think there's getting the basics mastered first and then moving on to innovation seems to be the biggest challenge that we've got. But certainly, we're never short of good ideas in our industry. I think the issue is that if you haven't mastered the basics of getting campaigns to work for acquisition, retention, loyalty, referral, and
Yeah.
preventing lapsed customers, then you can move on to the really exciting, highly complex, personalized, timely campaigns. We've also got something you mentioned earlier about the pricing in catalogs. The ability to be able to scan, whether it's a postcard right the way through to catalogs or packaging, and take them directly to a live offer digitally. I think that integration between the two channels is
Mm.
something that overcomes a lot of the obstacles with out of date marketing. It takes you to
Yeah,
the
price
latest offer.
changes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
again, price changes lasted like 20 minutes. Somebody would move, and then it'd be like, oh god, we're going to have to move everything else. But yeah, so what you're saying is essentially you've got a way of scanning the price on that thing that you can then go and see the real time price, if you like,
Yeah, it's a
through your digital
springboard.
device.
Effectively, you use the printer communication as a springboard to take them to the best, more instant digital offering. So you kind of get the best of both, and that's, I guess, my
Mm.
message is, it shouldn't be a battleground. It should be a best of both. And I think that technology we've got within print has existed for quite some time. I think it's that education piece again of working with marketeers and brands to give them the best mix of the
Mm.
two.
I think there's something to be said. I don't know if Jen would agree with this. And we've talked about this before on the discipline of growing up with printed mail especially from a CRM direct marketing perspective and a return on investment perspective. That actually the cheapness of email or app push or those kind of things has complacence is too strong a word, but I'll use it, has led some complacency in terms of return on investment and all that kind of stuff. You really had to be super tight with your targeting and really careful about your messaging and all the, clear about what your response mechanism was and all those kind of things to make print work well. I mean, it was great. I don't know if you did grow up with print, Jen, or am I just really old?
No, I would say like when I was in CRM, it was a little bit of a mix of both. I definitely worked on print campaigns, which to your point, I think we take everything seriously, but I definitely think if you're spending millions and millions of dollars on a direct mail, because I
Mm-hmm.
was at a very large like American
Right.
corporation, so when we
Yeah.
would send out a piece of direct mail, it was reserved for very special things because you knew everybody would see it, but also very special things because it was incredibly expensive. But yeah, I think when we were doing the direct mail, and I'm just talking about scale, right? We would send it
Yeah.
to, we had 180 million people. Our our customers is quite a few bits of mail, but I just remember, yes, taking it much more seriously and saying like,
Mm.
we really have to dial in on exactly who this is going to go to. We have to be really clean with the list and everything. And you would do that to a degree, I think, with email. But I think you're
Mm.
right. I think because it's digital, there's a lot of it. The perception of it can
Yeah.
be that it's like cheap, it's easy to send. So just to default, you're going to send it. But I feel like always with print, it was like, well, let's be really sure and really exact with our targeting. And I think that makes for better marketing. regardless.
I think there's a permanence to print that is
Yes.
that is. I'll be honest. When I first signed off my first print campaigns, when I started at Vodafone, it was terrifying,
Yeah.
absolutely terrifying. And there was a horror story. One of my friends got one number wrong in a phone number,
Oh God.
and it ended up going from like the response call center to being like an adult chat line. And the problem with that sort of stuff is you can't recall it. Do you know what I mean? Like with an email,
Yeah.
you can, and with print, you can't. I think to your point though, Jen, you made a really point about if I want someone to see, if I want everyone to see it, print's really valuable. And I think a lot of the stats from Rise again, when I was researching Richard, kind of show that the likelihood of somebody seeing a piece of direct mail versus an email is much higher. Because they go into their post box, they're giving, whereas
Sure,
you're getting
you can't
a
avoid
million
it
emails
if it.
a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
going back to your point about
Hmm.
the risk, I mean, obviously that's based off of, I would say, slightly larger, broader, generic campaigns. I think some of the
Yeah.
data-driven stuff that we do these days, you output the same or similar data that you would from a CRM for a
Yeah.
digital campaign as you would print now, and we're doing 30, 40 pieces of personalization per piece that are camera matched and sent out, and there's a level of checks and balances that the agencies run to avoid that kind of thing. And I think the speed and personalization that we have now is a lot different to how it was with sort of mass marketing.
Yeah.
The
So what you're
numbers
saying
you
is I'm
quote,
showing
Jen.
my age, Richard.
I'm saying we've come a long way.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
But no, I do. There is again. I stand by that bit about the discipline. I think you want to make sure you're getting it right with. You want to make sure you get it right with every channel. Don't get me wrong, but I think with there was something about direct mail and the cost and the permanence of it that gave you a real discipline that you would then bring to other channels. And maybe I'm just being old fashioned in that
It's very
regard. But
deliberate.
I think it's really
Yeah,
valuable.
if you're planning a customer journey, it becomes almost such a deliberate marketing message that it makes you really think about the consistency across the other channels. And I think that's why it's so important to integrate it into that mix.
And I would agree. I think we'll kind of close this section off by kind of saying that I think it is absolutely a tool that has huge value, whether it's direct mail, whether it's catalog, whether it's in-store print, whatever it might be. But specifically from my background, where I'm from the direct mail part of it, it's kind of fallen by the wayside, sadly, and I think that's sad. I think it can be, as you said, integrated with other channels. Mail with an email follow up or an app push follow up. There's different ways you can use it to drive people in store. There's lots of different options now with print that I think people are neglecting to look at. And I would say, I think you would, don't. Why would you throw a tool out of your toolbox to use another written thing? Why would you write something off just because it's on a piece, printed rather than not printed? What I find fascinating, not only about your company, is obviously where you're going and the success you're having from what you actually do, but the ethos behind the company. We've talked about
Sure.
brand purpose on this podcast a few times, and I think our view on it was, if you're built with a purpose inherent into you and the way you do business, it's great. Bolting it on when you're when you're trying to create a fig leaf of positivity over your brand, not so great. But your brand and the way that you work, it's threaded throughout the business. So if I can kind of you do some research into Webmart, you start to hear phrases like Marxist capitalism, and you start to see articles where Webmart is listed alongside, in Forbes no less, is listed alongside Nike, Starbucks, and Zoom in a piece about companies putting people above profits, which is extraordinary. I wonder if you could just give us a bit of background into that ethos and what that means from a Webmart perspective. What the sort of beliefs are there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously the Forbes thing we're extremely proud of because, we're not running, 5-6 figure marketing budgets.
No.
We're based in Oxfordshire. We've got a very small team. But I think it comes down to, being authentic. I mean, if it's always been there, then it's easier to be authentic and do the right thing. And obviously, I appreciate there's various. I find sort of bandwagons when it comes to sort of, you see LinkedIn trends and things like that. Whereas I think if we've always done it, it's always part of our DNA. It's easier to be consistent with the values, and I think that from our perspective, then when you do good with profits or just generally just being a decent human within a business, then it isn't questionable or judged based on your prior history, if that makes sense. And I think that,
Yeah.
to talk about this sort of Marxist capitalism thing, I mean, it really comes down to this concept of enough, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of talk at the moment about capitalism being broken, and I appreciate, obviously, there's many other models out there. We've always based our business off the principle of enough, and capitalism to raise profits, like any successful business, and Marxism to distribute those profits fairly. And I think that kind of concept of enough allows us to reduce our consumption footprint, our environmental footprint, our financial greed, and effectively, we've all got one planet, one allocation of resources, and I feel that the model we've had, even right through to this year, where we've been able to do good for our community, our suppliers, we paid them early when everyone else was freaking out about what to do.
Yeah, was it 7 days of invoice or something like that? I read.
Yeah, so just as COVID sort of kicked off, we paid all of our key suppliers on 7 days to keep, and that was out of our cash reserves, because we've been putting money into the bank before we've distributed it. We haven't paid out huge, debt. We haven't got debts or shareholder issues or anything like that. We've just basically done the right thing, put money in the bank over time, and then we distribute any surplus profits effectively. So, so even up until last week, I mean, we're in a global pandemic. We're just paying out a profit share bonus to all of our employees,
Cool.
and that's something that, I mean, I look at John Lewis cancelling theirs for the first time since '53. You look at our model, and I just start to think that maybe it's not perfect, but we're onto something.
No, it's interesting. I think General roll her eyes, even though I can't see it, I'm sure she will, because of the Bill Bernbach quote that I bang on about all the time, which is a principle isn't a principle until it costs you something.
Oh, totally.
You didn't have to pay those people within 7 days. You don't. Yeah, some of the things that you didn't have to pay a bonus, you could not have done. But it's the principle, therefore you do it.
Yeah, totally. And I think, if anything, out of this year, if we can weather the storm this year, not make a financial loss, pay out suppliers early, keep customer marketing flowing, and pay the staff fairly, as well as the ecosystem that we operate as a business, then it's a great place to be. And yeah, it comes at, you have to, we're facing the unknown back in the time when we were making these decisions. A lot of people did very different things from looking around. And I guess the other thing I would probably add in there is empathy. I know maybe I'm throwing maybe a few too many CEOs under the bus with this, but it's not a trait desired out of great leadership. It seems in the past, you want a tenacious leader. You want someone that's going to maybe be a bit more polarizing, and actually, whilst this sort of empathetic approach is maybe seen as a little bit more calm and overlooked. Actually, it's the sort of thing that I think that needs to be built into business DNA. You get so much further, through using empathy in decision making and your business values effectively.
I think Jen and I's thoughts been in the past about we're all well. This is my perspective. I'm not going to put this on Jen, but it's like making a profit is great. Maximizing a profit leads to problems.
Yes.
And I think that and for those who your CEO did a TEDx talk recently, didn't he? And I'll link that as well, because he kind of expands on this philosophy a little bit in a little bit more detail. How do you maintain the culture from a sort of recruitment perspective, from an onboarding perspective? What it sounds terrible because what you do is a little different. So how do you maintain that culture through internal engagement and all that kind of stuff with your teams?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we've tried to stick to our values, and like you say, sometimes that comes at a great thought over decisions, rather than making just really swift decisions. We try to base it across the values and be as consistent as possible. When we recruit people in, we tend to do it through heavily through referral. We tend to do it in house. We spend a long time deliberating over any new hires, and we have a really close onboarding process, which effectively allows us to compare the values of the person alongside the talent. We've got a lot of experienced people working for us, some that have come client side, some from agency side, or supplier side, and that mixture, that diversity really helps us. Equally, we have a very diverse team in terms of age. I think we have probably the youngest management team in the industry. And so bringing up talent, like myself, I'm sure Simon, our CEO, spotted me young age and sort of invested in me. Equally, it's the same goes for many of our team as well. We have a balance of sort of homegrown talent from a younger age, apprenticeships, etc. And I think that getting that balance right, that's enabled us to have people that are our culture through and through, as well as bringing people on that kind of journey that share the same vision, do good with profits effectively.
And does it manifest itself in sort of KPIs and assessment, sort of yearly assessments and all that kind of stuff as well?
Yeah, I
Just
mean
out of interest.
we have our anonymous kind of biannual surveys that we use to kind of bring out just feedback around the team, but we've also got everything from measuring happiness in the office, and we put that on the website, and various other ways that we try to capture the essence of the culture, and that's really those tiny little things all add up to the greater kind of vision that we have.
Okay, good, because it's interesting. We talk a lot about kind of customer-centric sacrifice, which basically means I'm prepared to forego short-term profits for doing the right thing
Yeah.
by our customers, essentially. And it seems like that's the kind of thing that you would say no to a short-term buck to kind of if it went completely against your ethics. And that's an interesting. That's the reason I was asking the question, is because we are conditioned to talk, money, more revenue, more revenue. It must be an interesting conversation with somebody, say a salesperson who's coming from the outside to your company, and then if you said, well, actually, let's weigh this up a little bit differently. Must be quite a culture shock for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they have to have a huge degree of trust to make that leap with their career, I guess. We've had a few that have made that leap, and it's paid off really, really well. And I think it is a very different operation. And I think that there are times that we have to turn things down, commercial opportunities, because they just don't fit. And rather than trying to push water uphill, it makes sense for us to continue on our path and work with people that do share the same values, and sometimes you don't get that right, and we're not going to maybe take the commercial gain just for going against our principles, because as you said earlier, you've got to stand for something, and we're happy to stand on those morals, basically.
Cool. Well, look, we also like to give our guests the opportunity to shill's the wrong word, but from a Webmart perspective, where do you see Webmart? What's the kind of evolution of Webmart? Where do you guys and girls go next? What's the next sort of evolution of where Webmart's going?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, from our perspective, we're effectively moving to this fully integrated marketing model with customer experience, from letterbox to online events to an experiential to in-store experience for click and collect and browsing to mobile purchases. So I think it's just kind of that full integration of marketing from our perspective to overlap with what people are doing so well out there, and helping them with maybe a weakness, and overlapping it. And I think also just kind of, if we can enable brands to own their customer relationship and compete with some of the larger retail sort of behemoths out there, to become a compelling alternative, and allow our customers to become a compelling alternative for doing their Christmas shopping or seasonal purchases, etc. And I think that's kind of that's our vision. If we can continue to do good with our profits and distribute the wealth fairly, then we'll do better in the economy, social impact, environmental impact. So yeah, I mean, I guess if you want me to do a plug,
Hey,
which it sounds like you're
absolutely
waiting for the
fine.
plug.
No, I'm just
We'll just give you the
giving you a
opportunity.
safe place.
Yeah, I mean, I'll check it out there. So if you're missing out on integrating and connecting your online journey with physical marketing, get in touch. We'll offer up some suggestions to get better results. If you're already doing it, but you want us to challenge it, get in touch. I'm sure we can tell you something you didn't know, or find a better way of doing it. Or if you want to do just a little bit of good in the world, this is part of what we were saying earlier about the culture. Just go on our website, play the little charity game.
Oh, the
The
game.
winner
Yes.
and the winner, there's top 5 winners we're going to be donating to a charity of your choice. So there's no harm if you've got lots of time on your hands at the moment. Go on and play the game, and we'll do a bit of good with the money.
Yeah.
To prove a point.
For anybody who hasn't played it, it's kind of like an endless runner / jumping game, isn't it? Essentially.
Yeah,
And
it's
the longer
just
you go, the more
yeah.
points you earn. It's just a fun little flash game on Webmart's website, which we will absolutely link to. And then, sort of, finally, from my perspective, what do you think is going to be the biggest barrier in going from where you are now to that situation? What is it? Is it perception of who Webmart are, the history of what Webmart, the print thing? What's going to be the biggest barrier, do you think, from your perspective?
Ooh, that's a really good question, that one. I would say it's overcoming the misconceptions. I think our industry's had this sort of been drawn into a bit of a, this versus that. And I think the misconceptions on the environment and the perception of kind of, oh, save the trees, when actually we have renewable sources for a lot of our stuff. And digital waste is going to become a huge topic over the next 10 years, and the carbon footprint of that. So I think the misconceptions around environment, cost, ROI to the channel, and sort of re-establishing that kind of education and knowledge from a very different perspective, from a more modern day sort of approach to what we do. That's going to be something that we find probably the most difficult. Is we're going against the tide almost in terms of education. I don't know where you can actually learn these skills anymore outside of picking up the phone to your agency and being supported by them. Right. So yeah, I would say that's probably it.
Okay, and as actually, I lied. I got one other question. In terms of the way, because obviously you're print management and you're working with different suppliers, do you have sort of a code of conduct for those suppliers that say I will only work with you if you're doing X, Y, and Z from a sustainability perspective or those kind of things?
Yeah, so
is there like a Webmart code of conduct?
Yeah. So we have like a fair trading agreement. So we publish it on the website. We're really open with it. There's no hidden rebates or anything like that. It's all publicated up there, and a big part of what we're doing with moving towards our vision and the time I'm spending with our supplier category management team is educating the suppliers on where we're going, the kind of approach that we need to take as an industry, and hopefully taking our suppliers on that journey and kind of showing them a different way, a different perception of how they can run a business. We're not forcing everybody to follow the Webmart model, but certainly if we can say we are able to do good, if we succeed, then would you like to come with us on that journey and help us, empower us? It's so important. We're supported by our suppliers to do this.
Gotcha. Well, look, we've covered a lot of ground there. Thank you very much for taking the time out to talk to us. Unless, Jen, you had anything else you wanted to
No, I think that's great. I've learned a ton. I think, Richard, thank you so much for coming on and kind of sharing your knowledge and expertise. And I feel like I think, selfishly, not to put down any other guests, but I've really enjoyed. This is definitely one of my top 1% interviews that we've done.
Wow.
So thank you.
I'll take that.
Well, look, as I say, thank you very much for your time, Richard. Much appreciated.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
So that's it for this episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand. We hope you enjoyed it. You can find show notes, resources, and more episodes on our website, everybodyhatesyourbrand.com. But before we go, let's leave on a positive note. Let's share what we're loving right now. So, Rob, what you got this week?
Well, I think it's time for self-reflection.
Oh.
So, and obviously it was a really good and lengthy interview, so we don't want to go on for too long.
Yes.
The thing I would like to say is this is the 20th episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand.
20 episodes.
I find extraordinary that we made it to 20, which I'm very proud of. I hope you are as well. Mm-hmm. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who's downloaded and listened and contributed and been interviewed and all those kind of things. We really,
everybody who's reached out, who said that they love the podcast, like all of our, I don't want to say fans because that seems really self.
Yeah, we don't have.
No, but we do have people that reach out all the time that say like, hey, we really are enjoying listening to the podcast. So thank you to those people. Thank you for, even if you haven't reached out and said anything, if you're just enjoying it, listening to it every once in a while, we appreciate you. And we would not have made it to 20 episodes without you. So thank you very much. Well, you did it. You've wasted another perfectly good half an hour or so with Rob and Jen and Richard and the Everybody Hates Your Brand podcast. Again, you can find us on everybodyhatesyourbrand.com and your podcast platform of choice. Have a week.
Take great care and be vigilant.